I'm Jenny Laurent, 32 years old, a senior data analyst at one of London's top tech firms. My life on paper is a mosaic of achievements: a first-class degree from Oxford, a meteoric rise to become the youngest senior analyst in my company's history, and a sleek apartment in Shoreditch that I paid for with my own sweat and sleepless nights. But no matter how high I climb, I've never been enough for my father, Victor Laurent. He's a titan in Paris's publishing world, a man whose name opens doors and whose expectations cast a shadow over my entire existence. To him, success isn't just a goal, it's a currency more valuable than love, family, or warmth. And I've spent my life bankrupt in his eyes. If you're listening, thank you for joining me. Where are you today? Drop your location in the comments. Share in the comments and let's walk through this together. Growing up in our family's elegant Parisian villa, surrounded by manicured gardens and polished facades, we were the picture of perfection to outsiders. But behind the heavy oak doors, the air was thick with unspoken rules. My mother, Isabelle, once a fiery journalist, softened into a quiet presence under Victor's gaze. Her love for me was real, gentle hugs in private moments, her eyes brimming with unspoken apologies, but she never dared challenge him. My older brother, Henry, was the golden heir, a lawyer who slipped effortlessly into Victor's world of contracts and prestige, his every move applauded. My younger sister, Clara, a social worker with a heart as wide as her smile, had a knack for soothing the tension that crackled through our home. She could make Victor laugh, a rare feat, and her quiet diplomacy kept our fragile family intact. But me? I was the outlier, the puzzle piece that never fit. Every milestone I achieved, top of my class, a full scholarship to Oxford, a groundbreaking data model adopted company-wide, was met with Victor's dismissive nod or a barbed comment about how I could have done better. "Why Oxford, Jenny? My alma mater would have carried more weight," he'd said when I got my acceptance letter. When I landed my first job, he mused, "Tech is unstable. You should have chosen law like Henry." Critique was a pinprick, accumulating over years into a wound I could no longer ignore. As the annual Laurent family reunion loomed, a knot of dread tightened in my chest. Held at our sprawling estate, it was less a gathering and more a stage for Victor to parade his legacy. This year, though, I decided to make a grand gesture, one I hoped might finally crack his icy exterior. With my latest bonus, I bought a BMW i7, a sleek electric masterpiece costing nearly a year's salary. I imagined presenting it to Victor for Father's Day, picturing his rare smile, a nod of pride, maybe even the words I'd chased for decades. "I'm proud of you, Jenny." It was a foolish fantasy, but hope is a stubborn thing. Yet, tucked in my purse was a secret that threatened to unravel everything. 3 months ago, a casual DNA test through a genealogy service revealed a truth that stopped my heart. Victor Laurent was not my biological father. Clinical report, now folded in a sealed envelope, explained the cold distance I'd felt my entire life, his sharp words, his fleeting glances, the way he seemed to see through me. As I prepared for the reunion, the weight of that envelope felt heavier than the car keys. Would I dare reveal it? Or would I keep chasing a love that was never mine to claim? The day before the Laurent family reunion, I gripped the leather steering wheel of the BMW i7, navigating the familiar winding roads toward our family's estate in the Parisian suburbs. Car's sleek dashboard glowed softly, a stark contrast to the churn of anxiety in my gut. I'd spent nearly a year's salary on this electric masterpiece, its midnight blue finish gleaming under the June sun, all in a desperate bid to win a sliver of Victor's approval. The annual gathering was tomorrow, but I'd planned to present the car early, hoping a private moment might coax a rare spark of pride from him. As the iron gates of the estate came into view, flanked by ivy-covered stone, my heart pounded like a drumbeat, half hope, half dread. Victor answered the door in his usual crisp linen shirt, his silver hair immaculate even on a Saturday. His eyes flicked over me, then to the car parked in the driveway, its curves catching the afternoon light. "Jenny, you're early," he said, glancing at his watch as if I'd interrupted a board meeting. "I brought your Father's Day gift," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt, holding out a small velvet box with the BMW key inside. His eyebrows lifted as he opened it, the silver emblem glinting. "Is this a joke?" he asked, his tone sharp enough to cut. I gestured to the window where the car sat like a silent plea. For a fleeting moment, his face softened, surprise, maybe even pleasure, before it hardened into his usual analytical mask. "This is excessive, Jenny. What are you trying to prove?" He circled the car, inspecting it like one of his publishing contracts, asking pointed questions about financing and range. I answered mechanically, clinging to the hope that his test drive might shift his mood. But as he pulled back into the garage, he remarked, "The handling's decent, but it's no match for German engineering." No thank you, no acknowledgement of the sacrifice. He parked the car out of sight, as if embarrassed by its presence, and returned to his study with a curt nod. The rejection stung, familiar but no less sharp, like a paper cut I should have seen coming. Back at my hotel that evening, I called Sophie Muller, my best friend and confidant, her voice a lifeline across the channel. "He didn't even say thank you, Sophie," I said, pacing the room, the city lights of Paris twinkling beyond the window. "I spent everything on that car, and he acted like I'd insulted him." Sophie's sigh crackled through the phone. "Jenny, you don't need his approval. You're enough. And please don't show him that DNA test. It's a nuclear bomb, it'll destroy everything." Her warning echoed the fear gnawing at me. The envelope in my purse, containing the genetic truth that Victor wasn't my father, felt like a live grenade, its pin half pulled. I'd found it through a casual ancestry test, a whim that turned my world upside down. It explained Victor's coldness, the way he'd always treated me as an outsider. But Sophie was right, revealing it could shatter the fragile scaffolding of our family. I promised her I'd keep it secret, but as I hung up, my fingers brushed the envelope's edge. It was more than proof of my origins. It was a ticking clock, counting down to a reckoning I wasn't sure I was ready for. Tomorrow's reunion loomed, and with it the question, would I keep playing the dutiful daughter or let the truth burn everything to the ground? The Laurent family reunion unfolded like a meticulously staged play at our Parisian estate, its marble columns and manicured lawns a facade for the simmering tensions within. The grand foyer buzzed with relatives and Victor's publishing associates, their tailored suits and clinking champagne flutes creating a polished hum of wealth. I'd spent hours choosing my outfit, a tailored navy dress, understated yet professional, paired with pearl earrings that whispered success without screaming for attention. It was armor, crafted to project the confidence I barely felt. As I stepped through the doors, my mother, Isabelle, enveloped me in a warm embrace, her lavender scent grounding me briefly. "You look radiant, Jenny," she whispered, her eyes soft with love but shadowed with worry. Victor, standing near the garden doors, offered only a curt nod, his gaze sliding past me as if I were a footnote in his empire. Crowds swirled, cousins exchanging pleasantries, Uncle Paul's booming laugh, Aunt Anna's rapid-fire questions about my love life. I smiled through it, deflecting with practiced ease, but my eyes kept drifting to Victor. He was in his element, commanding the room with calculated charm, his laughter with business associates louder than necessary. Henry arrived fashionably late, his perfect wife and children in tow, and Victor's face lit up. He pulled Henry into a hearty embrace, clapping his shoulder with a warmth I'd spent my life chasing. "My boy," he said, loud enough for the room to hear, while I stood frozen, an invisible guest at my own family's table. Through the bay windows, I caught sight of Victor leading a group of associates to the driveway, gesturing animatedly at the BMW i7 I'd gifted him. He opened its doors, pointed out its features, his face alive with pride, but not once did he mention it was my gift. The omission cut deeper than his words ever could. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, its mahogany table stretching under crystal chandeliers, each place setting a testament to Isabelle's meticulous care. I was seated far from the head, between a cousin's husband I barely knew and one of Victor's junior associates, a deliberate placement that felt like exile. Henry and his family sat near Victor, with Clara and her husband as buffers, their proximity a silent hierarchy. The meal progressed through 5 courses, each more elaborate than the last, but the air grew heavier with every passing minute. Victor steered the conversation with precision: real estate deals, Parisian politics, Henry's latest courtroom victory. His questions to me sharp and undermining. "Jenny, your tech firm's all about numbers, isn't it?" "A bit narrow compared to law," he'd say, pivoting to Henry before I could respond. Then came his speech. Victor rose, brandy glass in hand, his presence silencing the room like a conductor halting an orchestra. "Family is a legacy," he began, his voice rich with authority. "I'm blessed to see my children carry it forward." He turned to Henry, praising his unparalleled legal acumen that elevated the Laurent name. Clara's charity work earned a nod for its grace and impact. I braced for the inevitable omission, my fingers tightening around my napkin. But instead, his gaze locked on me, eyes narrowing with a glint of malice. "I'm proud of all my children," he said, pausing for effect, "except the loser sitting there." A ripple of uneasy laughter followed, guests assuming it was a jest, but the words hit like a blade, slicing through decades of hope. My face burned, then drained, the room blurring as every eye turned to me, some with pity, others with curiosity. The DNA test in my purse, its truth now undeniable, pulsed like a second heartbeat. Victor's cruelty wasn't just habit. It was rooted in a secret he'd likely always known. My blood wasn't his, and neither was my worth in his eyes. This public humiliation, cloaked as a joke, was the final straw, pushing me toward a reckoning I could no longer avoid. The air in the dining room felt suffocating, the weight of Victor's words, except the loser sitting there, hanging like a guillotine over the polished mahogany table. The uneasy laughter from relatives and Victor's publishing associates faded into a ringing silence, their eyes darting between pity and discomfort, pinning me to my seat. My heart thundered, each beat a reminder of the 32 years I'd spent chasing a shadow of approval that always slipped away. The envelope in my purse, its edges worn from my anxious fingers, was no longer just a secret. It was a weapon, a truth I could no longer bury. I'd promised Sophie I wouldn't detonate this bomb, but Victor's cruelty had lit the fuse. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the hardwood floor, the sound slicing through the tension. Every head turned, the room holding its breath as I reached into my purse and pulled out the sealed envelope, its stark white surface a silent scream against the opulent table setting. My hands were steady, a calm born not of peace but of clarity, the kind that comes when a lifetime of questions finds an answer. "For 32 years, I said, my voice clear and sharp, cutting through the haze of Victor's smug authority, "I've tried to make you proud, Father. I've twisted myself into every shape, climbed every ladder, hoping one day you'd see me. But now I understand why that was never possible." I placed the envelope precisely in the center of the table, its presence a challenge no one could ignore. "This is the truth about me and about you. Happy Father's Day." Victor's face froze, his brandy glass halfway to his lips, eyes narrowing as if calculating the cost of my defiance. Isabelle's knuckles whitened around her napkin, her gaze pleading, while Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Henry, ever the loyal son, leaned forward, his expression a mix of confusion and warning. I didn't wait for their reactions. Turning on my heel, I walked out of the dining room, my navy dress swishing with each deliberate step, my head high despite the tremor in my chest. The grand foyer, with its crystal chandelier and ancestral portraits, felt like a stage I was finally exiting. Whispers erupted behind me, a cacophony of shock and questions, but I kept moving, the cool evening air hitting my face as I stepped into the driveway. The BMW i7 gleamed under the estate's lanterns, still registered in my name, a fact Victor seemed to forget in his haste to claim it as his own. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against my skin, and locked the doors. As my fingers gripped the key fob, a memory flooded back, sharp and vivid, pulling me to a moment I'd buried deep. I was 6, clutching a colorful drawing of our house, its crooked lines and bright crayons a child's proud offering. I'd run to Victor's study, my small heart swelling with hope. "Look, Papa," I'd said, holding up the paper. He barely glanced at it, his pen scratching on some contract. "It's nothing special, Jenny. Henry won the school chess tournament today, that's worth celebrating." My face crumpled, tears stinging, but I hid them, retreating to my room. Later, Isabelle slipped in, her soft hands stroking my hair. "Your drawing is beautiful, Jenny," she whispered, tucking it into her keepsake box. "I'll keep it forever." Her love was a quiet beacon, but it couldn't erase the sting of Victor's dismissal, or the fact that she never confronted him to shield me. That memory, raw and searing, poured fuel on the fire inside me. It wasn't just one moment, it was a lifetime of them, each rejection building a wall between me and the father I'd never truly had. I started the engine, its low hum drowning out the chaos I'd left behind. In the rearview mirror, I saw Victor burst through the front door, the opened envelope clutched in his hand, his mouth open in a shout I couldn't hear. His silhouette, framed by the glowing house, was a portrait of rage and loss, but I felt no urge to turn back. As I accelerated down the maple-lined driveway, the estate shrinking behind me, a strange alchemy of pain and freedom surged through me. The BMW, once a desperate bid for love, was now my escape, carrying me away from a man whose approval I no longer needed. Truth in that envelope had shattered the chains of my childhood, and for the first time I drove toward a future that was mine alone. The moment I pulled onto the highway, leaving the Laurent estate in my rearview mirror, my phone began its relentless assault. Notifications buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, texts, voicemails, missed calls from Clara, Isabelle, Henry, even distant cousins caught in the blast radius of my exit. I silenced the ringer but kept the screen on, the glowing names a digital echo of the chaos I'd unleashed. Clara's first message was frantic. "Jenny, what just happened?" "Dad's losing it. Car's gone and he's screaming about the envelope. Please call me." Isabelle's voicemail was softer, trembling. "Jenny, come back. We need to talk." Henry's text was curt, predictably aligned with Victor. "Return the car, Jenny. This is low, even for you." I stared at the words, my hands steady on the BMW's wheel, the Paris skyline blurring past as I drove toward a hotel in the city center. The truth I'd dropped on that dining table, a DNA test proving Victor wasn't my father, had torn through the Laurent facade like a wrecking ball. Clara called later, her voice hushed, as if she were hiding in a corner of the estate. "Jenny, it's a mess," she said, breathless. Dad opened the envelope right there at the table, read it for maybe 10 seconds, then started shouting for Mom. She looked at it, went pale, and locked herself in their bedroom. He saw the car was gone and just lost it. I've never seen him like this. I could picture Victor, his controlled exterior cracking, pacing the driveway where his prized trophy, my gift, had vanished. Isabelle's text came at midnight, a confession typed in halting fragments. "Your father isn't Victor." It was Thomas Albrecht, my college love at Sorbonne. "My parents forced me to end it, and Victor offered to marry me, to give you his name. I'm so sorry, Jenny." The words confirmed what the DNA test had whispered, but they carried a new weight. My mother's regret, her silence, her complicity in Victor's coldness. 6 days later, a letter arrived from Victor's lawyer, demanding the return of the BMW, referred to as Mr. Laurent's property. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in my hotel room. The car was still in my name. I'd never signed it over, a detail Victor's ego had conveniently ignored. To him, it wasn't about legal ownership, it was about control. I'd taken back the car he'd paraded as his own, a symbol of his success, and with it, I'd stripped away his narrative. He wanted to punish me for daring to challenge him, for exposing the lie he'd lived for decades. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer, instructing her to clarify the car's ownership while I sipped coffee and stared at the Seine, its waters reflecting the weight of my choices. I met Isabelle a week later at a quiet cafe in Montmartre, far from the estate's suffocating grandeur. She looked older, her polished elegance replaced by a raw vulnerability, her hands trembling around her espresso cup. "Thomas was brilliant, a dreamer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "An engineering student who saw the world differently. When I got pregnant, my parents called it a scandal. Victor stepped in, promising to raise you as his own, but he couldn't. You had Thomas's eyes, his curiosity, and it haunted him." Her confession was a knife, cutting through years of silence. "Why didn't you protect me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You saw how he treated me, less than Henry, less than Clara." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was afraid, Jenny. Afraid of losing the family, of admitting the truth. I failed you." The words hurt, but they were honest, a crack in the wall we'd both built. For the first time, I saw not just the mother who'd stayed silent, but a woman trapped by her own choices. Our conversation wasn't closure, it was a beginning, a fragile bridge toward a relationship rooted in truth, not pretense. A month after the reunion, I emailed Thomas Albrecht, my biological father, my fingers hovering over the send button as if it might detonate my fragile new reality. "Now a tech CEO in Munich," he responded within hours. His words cautious but kind, shock at my existence, a request for time to process, and a tentative offer to meet. We agreed on a quiet London restaurant, and as I sat at a corner table, the clink of cutlery and hum of conversation felt distant against my racing pulse. When Thomas walked in, I saw myself in his sharp cheekbones, the curious glint in his hazel eyes, the way he tilted his head when listening. It was like meeting a mirror I'd never known existed. "Jenny," he said, his voice warm but hesitant, extending a hand before settling into a shy smile. Over coffee and pasta, he shared his story, a Sorbonne engineering student in love with Isabelle until her family deemed him unsuitable. "I never knew about you," he said, his gaze dropping to his plate. "But I always felt something missing, like a piece of my life I couldn't name." His words stirred a quiet ache. I'd felt that same void, a lifelong sense of not belonging. Our conversation flowed cautiously, my work in data analytics, his passion for sustainable tech, each sentence a step toward understanding, not instant kinship but a foundation built on mutual respect. Back in Paris, Clara became my anchor, her daily calls a lifeline. "You're still my sister, Jenny, no matter what," she'd say, her voice steadying me as I navigated the fallout. She mediated between me and Isabelle, encouraging honest conversations that peeled back decades of silence. Isabelle began to open up, her polished exterior giving way to raw regret. Over tea one afternoon, she admitted, "I thought hiding the truth protected you, but it only hurt you more." "I'm sorry, Jenny." Her apology didn't erase the pain, but it softened its edges, forging a path toward a relationship no longer bound by secrets. Henry, predictably, remained silent, his loyalty to Victor unshaken. I catch glimpses of his name in legal journals, a reminder of the brother who'd chosen allegiance over empathy. Yet the absence of his voice no longer stung. I was learning to let go of those who couldn't see me. My meetings with Thomas grew regular, each one revealing shared traits, our love for puzzles, a habit of doodling during calls. "You got that from my mother," he'd laugh, and I'd feel a quiet thrill, piecing together a heritage I'd never known. These connections, tentative but real, taught me that family wasn't just blood, it was the willingness to show up, to listen, to heal together, one truthful moment at a time. 6 months after the reunion that shattered the Laurent family's polished facade, I found myself at Clara's cozy Paris apartment for Thanksgiving dinner. The aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon-spiced pie filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile grandeur of Victor's estate. I'd declined his annual gathering, knowing my presence would be unwelcome, and for the first time, his absence didn't sting. Clara's home buzzed with warmth, her children giggling, her husband carving the bird, and Isabelle setting the table with a quiet smile. When my phone rang later that evening, Isabelle's voice came through, steady and sincere. "I'm proud of you, Jenny, not for your achievements, though they're remarkable, but for who you are." Those words, unburdened by conditions, were a balm to wounds I'd carried since childhood, healing the void Victor's approval could never fill. I'd sold the BMW i7 weeks earlier, its sleek frame a reminder of a desperate bid for love that wasn't mine to earn. The funds went into a savings account for my future, perhaps a home, a passion project, or simply the freedom to choose. Standing by my hotel window that night, gazing at the Thame's shimmering reflection under London's lights, I felt a lightness I'd never known. The river flowed on, indifferent to my past, and I realized I was free from Victor's shadow, from the need to prove my worth, from a name that had never truly defined me. Family, I understood now, wasn't bound by blood or titles. It was Clara, who called daily to check on me, Isabelle, who was learning to speak her truth, and Thomas, whose cautious connection offered a new kind of belonging. They loved me for being Jenny, not a Laurent. Reflecting on this journey, I've distilled 3 lessons for anyone who's felt unseen or unloved, as I once did. First, your value isn't tied to others' approval. I spent decades chasing Victor's validation, only to realize my worth was inherent, woven into my resilience and choices. Stop measuring yourself by someone else's yardstick. You're enough as you are. Second, family is who you choose, not just who you're born to. Clara, Isabelle, and Thomas became my anchors, not because of shared DNA, but because they saw and cherished the real me. Surround yourself with those who lift you up, even if they're not blood. Third, letting go is an act of strength, not surrender. Walking away from Victor's toxicity, reclaiming that car, and embracing my truth were painful but liberating. Release what diminishes you to make space for what nourishes your soul. As I stood by that window, the Thames stretching before me, I saw my reflection, not the daughter of Victor's expectations or Thomas's absence, but a woman who'd rebuilt her life on her own terms. Pain of my past hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined me. Each step forward, whether a quiet dinner with Clara, an honest talk with Isabelle, or a coffee with Thomas, was a brick in a new foundation, one of authenticity. My story isn't about a perfect ending, but a beginning, a reminder that freedom comes when you choose yourself. To those listening, know this: your worth is yours to claim, your family is yours to build, and your truth is your power. Live it fiercely. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Have a similar experience? We'd love to hear it.